Thank you. I like the fact you think I'm doing something right. That's soon going to fall down rapidly when you see this. Thank you all, and appreciate you giving up the rest of the coffee break and coming in to say hello. Wow, these lights are bright. Quick show of hands before we kick off. Who here works in talent acquisition? Not many. Who here works in people analytics? Who here does people analytics with a view to the external world as well as the internal world? A few. Cool. Those that do, come and talk to me afterwards. It'll be good to benchmark some stuff. Those that don't, hopefully this should give you some ideas around other things you could look at from a talent intel, people analytics perspective. So, yeah, title's pretty self-explanatory, how to build a case for TI in this digital world. The road ahead isn't really as straight as this one. We've got a few kinks in that road, but we're going to kick things off. Philips. Who here knows of Philips as a brand? Good to see. Who here thinks we make light bulbs? Fair few hands. TVs? Fair few hands. Audio equipment? Fair few hands. We don't do any of that. We don't make TVs, we don't make light bulbs, we don't make audio equipment. We used to. We don't do any of that anymore. Nowadays, we're very much a pure play health tech. So I'm going to do a little video that obviously I pulled it together. So I'll put a little video just to kick us off, set the scene, so you can see what Philips is up to nowadays.
How many people can say they work for a company with a clear mission, an exciting vision, and a true purpose? A company that believes there's always a way to make life better. At Philips, we can. Every day, we improve people's lives through meaningful innovation, and we've got a great story to tell about our future. The world of healthcare is changing rapidly. More and more people are taking ownership of their health and well-being. At the same time, the industry is transforming and embracing technology in new and innovative ways. For Philips, with a presence in both personal health and professional healthcare, this presents an opportunity to extend our leadership in health technology by focusing relentlessly on our customers' needs. We like to visualize healthcare as a continuum, starting with healthy living and prevention, precision diagnosis and personalized treatment, through to care in the home, since it suggests the notion of continuous care. And we want to join up the dots, ensuring care is seamless. In the consumer space, this approach encourages people to take an active role in the management of their own health. All around the world, we make a difference to people's lives by delivering locally relevant, connected solutions that support healthier lifestyles and those living with chronic disease. In the clinical space, we're focusing on delivering integrated solutions, combining systems, smart devices, software, and services that we co-create with our partners and customers to improve patient outcomes and productivity. Increasingly, we're partnering with customers in new business models, no longer selling products in a transactional manner, but engaging in long-term strategic partnerships to innovate care. Now it's time to implement our strategy with flawless execution. And how will we do this? By focusing on delivering our financial ambitions, by better serving our customers and improving productivity, by boosting growth in our core businesses, and by building winning solutions along the health continuum. It's a big challenge, but one we're ready for, thanks to the capabilities and experience we've built up over more than 125 years as a people-focused innovation company. Yet competition is fierce, and we have a lot to do, and not only in the ways we bring innovation to our customers. We must continue to improve the way we operate as a fast, agile, quality-focused global team, and our actions must speak louder than words. With every step we take, we'll move closer to our vision of improving the lives of 3 billion people a year by 2025. What greater challenge could we wish for?
There you go. Longer than I like, but you know. And it took me a long time to put that together, so I hope you all appreciate that. There's a few things that I like in that video. One, it just makes me proud to work at Philips. But it really highlights a couple of key things. One, people first. As a company, we're very much people first, so the fact that we are obsessed with individuals and with people, that obviously lends itself to what I do very nicely. Also, it talks about the journey we're going through as Philips. So we've gone through this massive transformation. Started off back as Philips 1.0, we like to call it. We've gone through, we became a big old industrial conglomerate. In today's society, today's world, the market, it's very hard to be a very big industrial conglomerate. The markets don't particularly like it. It's very hard to stay number one in so many different fields. So we took the move to really focus in on that health tech piece. That gave us some problems, though, as a company. We were shifting from a product company, so very much making the hardware and the products, to a digital-first company. We've never been that. We don't know what that is. We're moving from a product sales organization to a solution sales organization and a partnership model. We've never done that, so we don't know what that is. So we were asking lots of questions about what we are, how should we be structured, how should we be organized? And those questions were coming through, and no one had any answers. We didn't have the benchmarks, we didn't have the data we needed to answer these questions. We were facing disruption at every angle. Every angle, whether that's the business model and new people coming into the health tech space, the likes of Google, Amazon, IBM, everyone's shifting in, all the big technology players shifting into this health spectrum. Then obviously you've got the macro effects. You've got the changing nature of the workforce, bringing in the gig economy, for example. You've got Brexit. No one really saw that one coming. We got Trump. No one really saw that one coming. Most recent one in Ukraine, you've got a comedian that's just been voted in. Pretty sure no one saw that one coming. We've got some really big macro effects that are happening. Demographic cliff coming in. All the baby boomers retiring. So some really big macro effects. And then that's kicking through into the micro as well. So how is all that being affected at the local level? You're going to see your companies are hiring people they've never hired before, with skill sets they've never had before. Because the attrition rate's going up and people are staying with companies less and less time, you're going to have to do this at an increased rate. Your recruiters are going to have to do this hiring faster. They're going to have to do it more frequently with hiring managers that are constantly changing and changing their demands on that function. So with all that happening, there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of uncertainty. And we're all facing it. This isn't something unique to Philips. Every industry is facing disruption. Every industry is facing digitization or digitalization, depending on which route you're going. This is pervasive. We're all in this issue and this situation. And if you don't think you are in this situation, possibly you're not. Probably you just don't realize it. Now, I took a few of these grabs when I was just putting this deck together a few weeks back. The talent shortage is absolutely pervasive. One thing I noticed about these, they're all within a few weeks of each other. This wasn't something that took me ages to draw out from months and months and months of headlines. These were all within a matter of weeks. And it's happening everywhere. If you look across any field, whether it's nursing, whether it's AI, whether it's people to pick your fruit in southeast of England, everyone is facing talent shortages. Yes, talent's going to shift. Yes, what we're looking for is going to change. And yes, you have things like AI coming through and robotics, advanced robotics coming in that will change what we're looking for from a talent perspective. But fundamentally, we're all going to be fishing in the same ponds. We're all going to be looking for the same talent. Suddenly, if we're looking for image processing engineers, historically, there weren't many people looking for image processing engineers. Nowadays, you've got people, Amazon are looking for them to look at from their automated shop. They need the image processing to work out who's stealing from their shop. You have all the drone manufacturers to look at when the drones are looking and flying, making sure they're not crashing into things. So suddenly all this technology that used to be unique to your industry or to our industry, it's pervasive. We're all looking for the same stuff. PwC reckon that talent mismatch costs the global economy about 150 billion. That was back in 2014. That's a massive number. That's quite a scary number, I think. This will obviously drill down. There will be a talent mismatch in your own company where you've got roles that are open too long because the skills aren't where they should be, or I'd argue the roles aren't where they should be, or you're looking for skills that don't exist in the marketplace. So you will have your own talent mismatch figure. The scarier number, this was back in 2014, more recent number by, go on, Ferry, nearly 8.5 trillion in unrealized annual revenue by 2030 because of the talent mismatch. Now that is a really terrifying figure. The combined GDP of Germany and Japan. That's a really big, scary number. That's going to be a huge amount of your company's, my company, all of our companies' turnover, profitability, affected by this unrealized revenue. That's the sort of figures we're dealing with when we're talking about talent intelligence, when we're talking about where skills are moving and how we need to track this and why we need to track it. Isabel earlier on was talking about having a dollar value for what you're doing so that you can talk to the business in the language they understand. But go to a CFO with these sorts of figures and make them understand the context of what we're dealing with from a talent acquisition perspective, suddenly it makes sense. Suddenly the business cases start to become real, and you start to see why you need to start investing in this stuff. So, within Philips, given all this complexity, and we mentioned the VUCA world earlier, there's a growing demand. There's demand importance for what we needed to do around buy versus build strategy, talent strategy, location strategy. We were getting a lot of demand placed upon us as a TA function by the functions, by the business groups, by the business leaders around this stuff. They're saying, look, we need this data. We need to know what locations we should be going into. We need to know what organizations are doing this well. We need to know what sort of structure we should be aligning ourselves to. We've never been a marketing, finance, whatever function you want to put in a solution sales, digital first organization. We've got 130, 140 years of being a product sales organization. We don't know how to do this stuff. What does it look like? What are the roles and responsibilities for these people? What are the structures of these organizations? Who does it well? Do we build this ourselves? Do we buy a company that does this? Do we outsource it? Do we onshore it? Do we offshore it? All these questions they were having. And at the time, we were saying, well, we'll give you the best information we've got, but we've still got to do our day job. We're still trying to fill all these recs. So we took the stance of, actually, look, let's separate this. Let's make a whole separate TI organization to deal with these sorts of questions. And then we have the recruiters doing their version of intelligence as well. And I'll talk you through a bit more about that in a moment. The key thing to point out there, though, much like Isabel, this wasn't a big bang. This wasn't me coming in and going, yay, loads of headcount, build the world. It started off with myself and similarly half a headcount. I had half an intern. And for the first year, it was myself and half an intern. And we slowly built up. We're now a slightly bigger team, so we've got a team of 10, but it's really not about the team size. I know Isabel mentioned it as well. You could quite easily go down the route of, say, market intelligence. We have massive teams aligned to the business, very much operational intelligence, really, really big teams. I don't think that's necessarily what you need from TA, depends on the model, but I think with talent intelligence, it's more around the high-value topics, small team, more consultative, less around the operational intelligence. And I'll come on to why I think that in a minute. But what is talent intelligence? There are a few definitions. So if you throw what is talent intelligence into Google, there are 3 or 4 main definitions out there. They're all largely irrelevant to a certain extent because when you actually talk to the talent intelligence teams that are out there, we're all doing different stuff. There is no consensus around what is a good talent intelligence function. What should we be doing? Some people are much more ingrained into talent acquisition, and they're looking around the data and the analytics of the TA function, the pipeline that's in place, the effective sources of hire, etc. Some much more around the business and what we're doing as an organization. So there's still a lot of grey area around what is talent intelligence. Broadly speaking, though, it's using data to affect your decisions and make better decisions for a business. And obviously, being talent is talent data. I'd say where it differs from a traditional HR analytics or people analytics function is there's a heavier weighting on that external piece. So there's a much heavier weighting on external data, whether that's pre-aggregated from a platform that's out there. I won't mention the vendors, but there's lots of vendors. Some of them are outside, so go and have a chat with them. Whether it's publicly available data from the ILO, or I'll talk about sources in a second, but it's looking at that external data, the external context. Yes, we use the internal data, we bring it back in to give a full picture, but it's really about that context. Biggest thing, my favorite quote, and I'm sure you'll know it well, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. When it comes to talent acquisition, in particular, this could not be more true. I can't emphasize that enough. When you're hiring for whatever job, a software engineer, the hiring manager's opinion of the market and of the candidates and of what's going on is as valid as any recruiter's. The recruiter may have been doing this for 15 years. The recruiter may have been doing it for 20 years. They may have specialized in this all their life, all their career. Their opinion is no more valid than the hiring managers, in the hiring manager's mind. You're struggling to fill that rec. Well, I know my mate Dave, he's been looking for 3 months. There must be loads of Daves out there, loads of candidates. Why are you struggling? You must be rubbish at your job. Without data, you're just a person with an opinion. And that runs absolutely through everything that I'm talking about today. You have to find the data. It's not always perfect. Sometimes you're looking at it and saying, well, actually, we're looking for the trends across this data. But you have to get the data to back up what you're saying, to back up the argument. Sometimes it does challenge you in the recruiting function. It's saying you have a preconceived idea that, for example, money is the reason we're not hiring any of these people. And it can come back, no, you're paying absolutely fine. It's not money at all. So you have to dig deeper and say, okay, what's the root cause here? What's really going on? Key thing, though, without data, just another person with an opinion. Talking of data, luckily, there are tons of data points with talent intelligence. There's loads out there. This is just a few that I've put up there, but we've got over 150 that we use within Philips. Everything from the Economist Intelligence Unit, the International Labour Organization, you've got things like OECD, I've got CEB up there for Talent Neuron, but there's also other platforms, there's Talent Intuition, there's EMSI, there's LinkedIn, Ralph, LinkedIn Talent Insights. They all have their pros and cons. CIA World Factbook is one of my favorite websites. Has anyone been on that before, the World Factbook? Definitely go and visit it. It's really interesting. The CIA basically compiled data on every country. And they give you all the unemployment rates, they give you the main manufacturing, they give you loads of data about the country. But given it's the CIA, you can pretty much guarantee that they're probably turning on your camera and having a little look at you at the same time. So I always like to give them a little wave whenever I get on the World Factbook. It's a great site. But the main thing here is there's lots of data. This is just a few of the external sources. There's lots of data out there. Whether you like the hard sources, whether you want to go into the softer sources and listen to podcasts, the amount of data my team get from listening to podcasts, it's unreal. The amount of benchmarking data on organizations you can get from podcasts, unbelievable. People give this information out there. They give it away on podcasts, they give it away on presentations like this. They are openly talking about what they're doing around their organization, around the structures. People talk about this stuff a lot because we're all in an uncertain time and people are trying to understand, look, am I doing this stuff right? Am I doing it wrong? How does it work? So people will talk about this stuff quite a lot and go out there and get it. If anyone wants a full list of this, just drop me a note afterwards. I've got a public list for 150 odd sites. So drop me a note rather than trying to write them all down. So I talked about the different types of intelligence. At Philips, we were quite lucky in that we took the decision to split things out. And I'm not saying everyone's going to have this luxury, but it's still the same types of intelligence. You can either do it all wrapped into one big bundle, or you can split it out like we have. Or I'm sure there's other models as well. So recruiter level. I mentioned we've got a small team, so a small team of 10. That's the talent intelligence team. In reality, we've got a team of 300-400 recruiters all doing intel. Caveat, should be doing intel. And they should be doing this stuff. So they should understand their labour market, look at the role design, the sourcing strategy insights, etc. They should be doing this for all of their work. Every role they get, they should be doing a full intel briefing document before they go in and talk to the business, to set expectations, to set alignment, to make the business realise that we're not, coming back to Isabel's point, an administrative function, we're a consultative function. Otherwise, we'd broadly be called recruitment administrators, which there are people doing that, but it's generally not the consultant that's doing the job. So they should be doing this stuff. And really, from a TI perspective, it's about giving them the ammunition for this. One thing I'd slightly disagree with Isabel on is around platform fatigue. I think there's a real issue in the industry we have at the moment where we're asking recruiters to work off a huge number of platforms, multiple platforms, and they don't like that. They don't like that. They go for the path of least resistance. So if you're saying use LinkedIn for this, use Workday for this, use Avature for this, go and look at this data set over here for you, use Excel for this, they're just going to start dropping things off that aren't easy to use and aren't there in the same platform. So that's probably the single hardest thing I'd say to fix. If you're trying to get recruiters to do intel on a regular and frequent basis, and you're doing it by the carrot method, so trying to show the benefits of doing it, that's the hardest thing. It's platform fatigue and just drop off. You can do it by the stick method and just say, look, we're going to do spot audits for every rec you've got, and if there's no intel on there, we're going to come down at you. It's your job. Do your job. Pros and cons to both. But that's what we expect from each recruiter. Within my function, we look at slightly different things. So we look at part of the M&A stream. So every M&A deal we go through, we look at the feasibility and the risk of that. Are we about to buy a company where we want to rapidly expand and grow, but the location we're in is never going to be feasible for that? Are we about to buy a company where the skill set we want is going to be impossible to hire for, because that's the only company that does that particular software engineering, that particular product? So the actual plans for the business aren't going to be realised. I heard something yesterday, in actual fact, that 80% of M&A deals fail in terms of the realisation. It's a really big issue. And I'm not saying it's purely because of the talent intelligence, it's not being done. That is a factor. But there's lots of reasons why those deals fail. But if we can start trying to mitigate that risk and mitigating that failure rate, that's going to be a good thing. So M&A. Location strategy is massive for us. Massive. So about 130, 140-year history of buying companies, developing our market. We've never really consolidated that in, and we're now not necessarily in the locations we need to be for the new world we want to be in. So probably about 75% of all our work is around location. Are we in the right locations? Should we be looking at merging locations? What's the future feasibility of locations? I mentioned the demographic cliff earlier. Are you in locations where half your population are going to retire in the next 10 years? And if they do, what are you going to do about that? Have you got an early talent program in place to give you the population to kick through for that? Is there the overall talent market in place in that location to even make this sustainable? Are you in the right location? Do you even want to be in a fixed location? With the changing nature of the workforce, people moving to a gig economy and remote working, why do we even need that fixed location anymore? So location's really big. I'd say definitely try and tie in with your real estate function on that one. Their cycle times are usually slightly longer, which is good because it means you can tie in and start looking at 2, 3, 5 years out, and you can start planning from a TA perspective. But there's no point us trying to gear up this location because 3 years down the line we're not keeping that. We're moving the whole thing anyway. So try and tie in with real estate as early as possible. Custom reports to come back to, org design, role mapping. That's a really big thing for us at the moment. Our company is definitely going through the phase of saying, we know we're not right, but we don't know what we should be. We don't know who does this well. We don't know what good looks like in this space. So there's a lot of benchmarking we're going through from an organizational perspective, including in TI, to say, what does good look like? What should we be doing? What shouldn't we be doing? What roles and responsibilities and handoffs should we have in place? I'd say org design is probably my favorite chunk of work we do. I find it the most interesting because you're really digging into companies, and that's when you're actually doing primary research as well. So you're reaching out and talking to these people as well. It's not just desk-based research. I'd equally say it's the most frustrating. The most frustrating. You can spend literally weeks into months digging into companies and get nothing. Absolutely nothing. We've had companies we've tried to dig into in the past where they had corporate guidelines that no one would do any speaking engagements. So you couldn't find any slide decks shared anywhere. They wouldn't do any podcasts, so you couldn't listen to anything. They didn't publish anything online, so you couldn't read anything. You couldn't interview any of the current employees. They were under NDA. You couldn't interview any of the former employees because they were still under NDA. It was just a nightmare. Beyond looking at their job descriptions and looking at where that was going and the sort of skills they were looking for, it's very, very hard. So it's very important. I couldn't recommend it highly enough. It's really, really good stuff. The stuff you can get out of it really can fundamentally change your organization. You could be going for this structure. You actually look at it and actually realize that because the budget's held differently, it completely invalidates the structure. We've had that a number of times where because the company we were benchmarking was looking at the solution sales, for example, and a solutions piece globally and going down that BG and solutions route, but the budget was all held locally in market, the local MDs were just saying, I'm not going to do that. I don't care. It's not affecting my bonus. My bonus is on what sells in this market, so I'm just going to do what's good for my market. So really digging underneath, under the hood, as it were, and understanding org charts, org design, what's working, what isn't, that's really, really good. Come back to the custom reports. They're the weird and wonderful questions we get, and that could be absolutely anything. It could be anything from looking at the future competitor analysis. It could be looking at diversity and inclusion. It could be organizational network analysis. It could be absolutely anything. We get quite a varied requests coming through, and they're basically the what-if type pieces. What if this happens? What if this doesn't happen? What if we change this? Those sorts of questions. I love them just because they make you think a bit more. Location studies, really impactful, affect the bottom line, can really bring in kind of the big dollar signs, as it were, but they're quite structured. You know, once you've done the first 30, the next 50 kind of slide into place. They don't feel too challenging anymore. And you just kind of going through the motions, getting the contextual information in, it feels much more structured. Those custom reports, they challenge the team a bit more. So I thought I'd give you an example of something we did, just to give you a bit of context. So once again, I didn't draw this picture. This is a site that it's not built yet, so we will have. Essentially, we had the R&D leadership team in North America come to us. And they said, look, we've been in Cambridge, Massachusetts, for about 18 months now. We'd moved in. It was surprisingly smooth. It went surprisingly well. They thought they were going to have a much higher attrition rate, which was good. Well, it's not good that they thought they were going to have a higher attrition rate. It's good that it wasn't as high as they thought. So they were feeling in a good, healthy place. They wanted to expand out. They wanted to look at what's the feasibility of expanding this out quite dramatically. We think we're okay on the numbers. We think salary-wise we're not too bad. We think we're all right from a broader complement bends perspective. But it's the softer bends we're not sure about, and it's the context of this location we're not sure about whether it's feasible. So we started doing a load of work. We dug into the location, so Cambridge overall, how that's transformed over the last 10 years, where it's moving, the sort of industries it's shifting towards, what companies are moving in, what companies are moving out, their expansion plans, that sort of stuff. We started looking at the roles specifically and said, well, if this does go wrong, where else can we go? What are our B plan, C plan? What other locations can we look to start bringing this talent in from if we were going to have issues? What are the benefits these other companies are facing or having? You know, you've got some very stiff competition in Cambridge, Massachusetts. You've got all the big tech players are there, some of them with their lovely beanbags and some of them with free lunches, etc. We don't have beanbags or free lunches. So there's a lot of these kind of softer cultural benefits that the people that we are actually targeting were saying, well, you don't feel like a technology company. When I come into your office, it doesn't feel like that. When I see your benefits, it doesn't feel like that. So there's a lot of these conversations around how people were feeling It was a much softer data set. So we looked into it. Was it feasible? Yep, no problem at all. Is it something that's going to be scalable? Yep, we can certainly do that. And in the end, we didn't only move our R&D center and expand that, we moved our entire North American headquarters. And this is Frans van Houten, our CEO, who said at the time, said, as we're focusing on innovation for health, we've evaluated our real estate footprint, decided that rather being in the more quiet areas, we ought to be in the hotspots of talent. Which, Frans, thank you very much, I like the quote. But the bit I particularly like is the fact he's drawing out, we're moving for the talent. And that was his primary quote around this entire move, was around the talent. And that gave us a lot of power and ammunition as a TI function. Because if the CEO is saying, we're shifting for the talent, suddenly all those conversations you have where you're looking at the weightings and the parameters and people are saying, yeah, I don't really care about the sustainability of the talent pool, I really care about the cost. Just get me a really cheap place. I don't care if you can't find any people there, just make sure it's really cheap. Suddenly we go, well, that's great that you're thinking that, but Frans isn't thinking that. When we can't hire these people, there's an effect on our bottom line. Do you want to go to Frans and tell him that's why? Because you chose to go into a location where we've told you not to go? So it gave us a really good backing and validation that actually what we're doing is right and we should be doing this stuff. How do we crack into it? So red flags are the easiest way to start thinking about this stuff, particularly in TA, because we have lots of red flags. So if you start looking across your TA data, there's lots of stuff to look at. You could have areas with particularly high time to hire, particularly high cost per hire, particularly high attrition rates. There's lots and lots of data. If you're starting to see a huge drop-off rate on all your new hires, why is that? If you're seeing a huge outlier in terms of time to hire, why is that? If you're looking at the data and saying, well, actually, we're not bringing these M&A companies in and the hiring is dropping off, why is that? I'd say the big red flags in TA, there's lots and lots of them out there. As I say, we can start looking into demographic cliffs, you can start looking at how your organisation is designed, but the big thing initially, just look for the red flags. They might not be the actual question you're looking to answer, but it'll give you that rabbit warren to follow down. So if you're looking at time to hire, why have we got a really high time to hire? Is it because the skill set's really tough? Is it because we're misaligning? Is it because the recruiters aren't good enough? Is it because the hiring manager's really bad? Is it because when you cross-reference that with employee engagement, for example, the actual part of the business has got a really terrible employee engagement score, and they really don't want to work there. So they're not going to really pay much attention to try and get somebody new into the business because they don't want to work there in the first place. So look for the red flags and start digging into them and questioning what's going on there. And there's lots, as I say. Ones I mentioned, just a couple. You will have plenty of red flags to start digging into. Any biologists in the room? Anyone? Anyone want to hazard a guess what these are? I'll give you a clue. They're a type of cell. Yes. You're the first person to ever get that right. Well done. You can have a prize. Pick one of the squidgy balls outside. Yeah, chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is in all plant cells. It's what makes plants green. It's what they use to photosynthesize and turn sunlight into energy. It's a bit of a track change, this bit, isn't it? So, from that picture, it all looks pretty healthy. The cell walls are all in place. Chlorophyll looks pretty good. It's a bit fuzzy, but it wasn't my picture, so I'm not that fussed. But it all looks pretty healthy. And from that, you could probably infer, do you know what? That leaf is probably in fairly decent health. You could maybe suggest that the twig is pretty healthy to get that sort of health. You could maybe infer that the branch is healthy. Yeah, you could maybe infer that. You could hazard a guess that the tree is healthy. Yeah, you could probably guess that. But it doesn't really give you the full picture. Your tree could be as healthy as you like, but if you're not understanding the broader context of what's going on, all you're really doing is seeing misinformation. You're not understanding what's really at play. So how does this relate to what we're talking about? What I mean is if you start doing a deep dive into the red flags, and you've got a really bad time to hire on the software engineering rec in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we're digging right into that, really care about that, and we're really digging deep, 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 we're completely missing the broader context. We're completely missing that it might not be anything to do with that rec. It might not be anything to do with Cambridge, Massachusetts. It might not be anything to do with that hiring manager or that line of the business. It could be something much, much broader that we're just not seeing the big picture. And sometimes that stepping back and saying, hold up, what's really going on here? What's the broader context here? That's one of the aspects that TA will struggle with. And that's one of the reasons why a people analytics function or a TI function can really help the TA org, because you can take that step back and you can say, hold up, I know you're stuck in this rec, and I know for you, filling this rec is the most important thing, and getting the right intel for this rec is the most important thing. But what about the broader context? What's really going on? And you see this across a number of things. You see it at a recruitment level. You see it in strategic workforce planning. I was talking to somebody recently where they did all their SWP at a local level, rolled it up, and it all stand as a structure, all made sense. Grassroots, up it goes. Everyone's happy. You've got the most important recs, you know what's going on, you can see where the workforce plan is going. But because no one was taking that holistic view and saying, hold up, what's really going on here, you'd have situations where one part of the business was saying, for argument's sake, software is really not important for us. Our real core priority is marketing. That's all we really care about. Yeah, we got software, but they're not really that important for our local business unit. You have another part of the business saying, software is all we need. We don't care about marketing. We really care about software. So because they weren't really talking to each other, you were getting this completely misinformed top-level view where you're saying, well, hold up, what do we really need as a company? As an organisation, what's important to us? You didn't really get clarity of view. You didn't really get that single view of saying, well, actually, we're making redundancies in software over here. They should be working on this stuff. Or marketing over here, they should be working on this stuff. There wasn't any of that stepping back to say, what do we really need as an organisation? Where are we going as an organisation? Yes, it's important for your operational level down now. It may even be important for your operational level in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months' time. But if we want to survive as companies, we've got to expand that horizon a little bit further out and think a bit further out. And I think that's one of the real functions that we can play in this whole piece, is to really start challenging the business to say, never mind about hitting your P&L for now. If you don't have the right structures and people in place planned for the next 5 years, we won't be sustainable. Our companies simply won't survive. Yes, you'll get your bonus for the next 24 months, but the company will die. So it's challenging them a little bit harder and making sure that we're seeing that big picture in the broader context.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
Go!
The answer is 13. But did you see the moonwalking bear?
Now, obviously, this was written or videoed for cyclists. Thank you to our friends at TfL. I don't know if anyone's here from TfL today, but thank you for them. I think this is really to labour that point home. If you're focused on particular topics, if you're focused on particular areas, it can get really easy just to be blinkered and only to look at that. And sometimes you really have to step back. You really have to take that viewpoint. People say getting into the balcony or however you want to phrase it. But just take that headspace and just sit back and say, well, what are we really trying to achieve? What's really going on? What's the bigger picture here? What's the bigger context here? And we've all got these moonwalking bears. All of our companies will have big topics, big issues, big themes that are running through our company, but because no one's had that headspace to step back and say, what's going on with this, we just can't identify it. We don't see it. So, closing thought, don't get so caught up in the process, so busy in the weeds, you miss the big picture, miss the context, and you miss that new walking bear going through your organisation. Thank you very much.
Question for Toby. Question for Toby. I have a question, and I am going to refrain from asking it in favor of your question. Please go ahead.
I was wondering, if you start a business case, how long does it take from the moment you identify one till the moment you can give them an insight?
Yep. So in case anyone didn't hear, that was, if you've got a business case, how long does it take from the inception through to delivery? It's a hard one to answer in terms of the breadth of report we do. So, but as an average, it's about 6 weeks, around that sort of figure. The sort of work where would normally take 3 months if you went to a research firm or one of the big four consulting, 3-4 month type project, we'd be expected to deliver in 6-7 weeks. We have very tight timeline. That's not what I would suggest, by the way. Entirely not. We don't have any slack. We don't have any buffer in there. We don't have any spare capacity in there. We run far too lean as a function. So it's absolutely not what I would suggest. But it's about where we're at. It's about where we're at. We have the odd project that's much, much quicker, very quick turnaround that the business think will take months, but in actual fact, because you can automate or build tools, you can do this stuff a lot faster. Some projects will take months and months and months. We've got one project at the moment. It was forecast to take 4 weeks. We're now the 5th phase of it, and it's taken over 6 months because the goalposts move. And this comes back to nailing down the root cause of what really the business issue is. The business didn't realise what their issue is. We thought we'd bottomed it out. We thought we nailed it down. As other stakeholders got drawn into the process, they were giving their opinion. Being a Dutch company, we like to get stakeholders involved. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone's allowed in to have a chat. So we ended up with a really, really broad stakeholder team, and that was just dragged on. But about 6-7 weeks.